Okay, we do have a quorum tonight, and the first thing on our agenda is the organization of the commission, which is the election of officers. And Mrs. Parrish, I will turn that over to you, please, to begin with.
Thank you. The procedure this evening is that I will call for nominations for the chairman position. The Planning Commission will then vote, and then the chairman, the newly elected chairman, will take over at that point to take nominations for the vice chairman. Once the vice chairman is voted in, we're going to take a brief recess so that people can adjust seating if you wish, and typically the chair sits in the middle seat, and that Paulette can then adjust the voting machine. So if anybody wishes to move seats, please consider that at that time as well. So at this point, I'll ask for nominations for the chairman.
I'll nominate Greg Newhouse.
I'll second that.
Are there any other nominations? All right, call for a vote.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
So, Chairman Newhouse, you will now take over for nominations for the vice chair.
Over. Would you take over for the vice chair? Yes.
Very good.
Correct.
I'll take a nomination for the vice chair.
I nominate Mary Lee Carter.
A vote? Congratulations.
You guys. Now
We will shift into recess.
Now there's a recess, and Paulette will adjust the voting machine once everyone decides on their seating arrangements.
I think I'm supposed to go to the left of the chairman.
Yes, that. Thank you. I have a few announcements. Just looking at the planning update that was provided in your packet, on February the 17th, we'll have the Verizon wireless tower at Hazelwild Farm. That's the case that was postponed from last month. We also do have the kennel, tree nut kennel, that's in the Livingston district. That's a special use. We will also have the unified fee schedule for zoning, environmental, planning, GIS. The Board of Supervisors, when they adopted the budget this past year, asked us to do an update of that fee schedule, so we'll have a public hearing on that as well. One other item at your places, we did receive notice of a community meeting. This is for rezoning for some townhomes on Thursday, February the 26th at 6:30 p.m. at Central Virginia Housing Coalition. It's property that they own next to their office on Hudgens Road. So that meeting is to consider, or not to consider, but to gain information on their proposal for 14 townhomes. The meeting is at 208 Hudgens Road, 6:30 p.m. on Thursday, February the 25th. Thank you.
May I ask a question, please?
Absolutely.
Wanda, to renew those of us who've been here for a while, and also for new members, when you have a community meeting, may more than 2 members attend, or just is it still that only 2 members can attend that meeting?
2 members may attend the meeting, and typically the Planning Commission defers to the member whose district that project is located in for one of the slots.
Yes. But, so therefore, it would just be one other.
One other.
One
yes.
other. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Moving on to review and approval of the minutes. I trust everybody's had a chance to review. Any comment?
Mr. Chairman, just one on the call to order. Mr. Stuber, that should be Ms. Carter called the meeting to order.
I think we're making that notation right now.
With that, I make a motion for approval.
Second.
Please vote. Motion passes. Moving on to any unfinished business. I guess we'll move on to the public hearing.
Floor computer, please. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a request to rezone 1 acre from residential 2 to commercial 3 to allow for all of the permitted uses in the C3 district. This is an existing zoning map. You'll see this property is located on Tidewater Trail, just south of the intersection with Benchmark Road. A convenience store known as the Tidewater Market has operated on the site for approximately 50 years or so. The convenience store has operated on the property up to this point as a legal non-conforming use since the property is zoned residential. The applicant could continue to operate the convenience store on the site, but for any other commercial uses, obviously they have to go through this rezoning process. The C3 zoning district is, of course, the most intense of the commercial districts. The applicant has not identified specific uses for the property, nor are they proposing any improvements to the site as part of their request. And I meant to preface my presentation, and the board directed us to change the format of our presentation a little bit. So you'll see we're starting out with the recommendation, and we'll move into more of the project information as I go forward. Staff is recommending denial of the application. The request is for the most intense commercial district, but the applicant's not providing any improvements to bring the site into compliance with current county code requirements. Also, the site, as it exists today, does not meet the current county code requirements for commercial development. It's not consistent with the comprehensive plan with regards to pedestrian connections and access management. Nor is it consistent with the surrounding commercial development that has built up to the county code standard. Since a site plan is not required, and it's not required because the applicant intends to use the property as is, the rezoning process is really the only opportunity going through this rezoning process to get this site built up to standards. Before you is the generalized development plan that was submitted by the applicant. You'll see that this shows the existing conditions of the property. There's 2 access points on Tidewater Trail and an existing 4,000 square foot building with some parking. While the applicant is not redeveloping the site itself, they are already in the process of renovating the interior of the building to create 2 2,000 square foot leasable spaces. And so these pictures were just taken today. You can see that that process is already underway. And like I mentioned, they have not identified to date any specific users. As part of the review, staff identified several concerns related to the request, all of which relate to the fact that the property is already improved and has been in use for 50-some years and does not meet the county code requirements. Typically, a rezoning comes before you on vacant property, and for that property to develop, they have to have a site plan. So there's no question that they'll develop to county standards. This one's a little unique because the building is already there, the parking's there, the access is there. So since there's no redevelopment to the site plan's not required. First concerns specifically relate to the access. It has the 2 points of access already. 2 points of access are not supported by VDOT nor the comprehensive plan. Curb cuts should always be limited to the extent possible for access management. This is obviously a safety concern as well as vehicle impacts. The adjacent property to the south, which would be on this side here, that's owned by the Lighthouse Academy. It is an undeveloped piece of property that they own, which is right adjacent. Another code requirement, as you're familiar with, is interparcel connections. This property adjacent is zoned commercial, and it would be appropriate. It would be a code requirement under normal circumstances for them to provide that interparcel connections on both sides to those existing commercial properties. Second concern is that the adjacent property to the rear, that is a residential zoned property. It's a home, the use is residential. The code would require transitional screening to buffer that residential use from the commercial use. And of course, the applicant is not providing any transitional screening to date. Another code requirement for all development is the installation of sidewalks along the frontage of the property. You'll see multiple segments are already constructed, which I've highlighted for you in yellow. There's also, off of this map to the south, is 300 feet of sidewalk that was constructed as part of the Hamilton Crossing development. You'll see that here's the shopping center, runs through here. There are a couple of gaps that exist. As these properties redevelop, they'll build their portion of the sidewalk. There is a portion here. The adjacent site here is being used as an office and auto repair. As those properties redevelop, they would, of course, be required to install their sidewalk, but they're already currently zoned commercial. A concern that was raised by the health department during review is that there's no permit for the existing septic system on site, so a complete evaluation would need to be completed. It may be that the existing system will not accommodate any new commercial uses. The property is located in the primary development boundary. They can connect to public utilities. Off-site easements may be needed to do that. There's no requirement that they connect to public utilities, but they have that option. Again, I'll reiterate, if this was a typical rezoning on vacant property, they would come in with their site plan, and there's no questions that these improvements would be installed. Given the applicant's intention to use the site as is, the county has no mechanism to require that the site be brought up to standards other than through this rezoning process. That's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
If there are no questions, we'll hear from the applicant. Is the applicant here?
Everybody hear me okay? Thank you. My name is Mark Smith. I work for Gerald Properties, Inc. We're a real estate development firm located in the city of Fredericksburg, but most of the business that we do is in Spotsylvania County. Most recently, we were part of the Lidl deal that brought in almost a million square foot building, over 500 jobs, 125 million investment into the county. And again, we also did recently a cookout deal, cookout restaurants that's going to go down to what we call the Christmas tree lots, right next to Rite Aid and Wawa. And we recently just bought the old Martin's Manor. So those are just a few things that we've done recently inside the Spotsylvania County. We continue to look to do more. My presentation today is for the rezoning of the Tidewater Market. If you would go to the next slide, please.
Floor computer, thank you.
You see the aerial, it's Route 2 and Benchmark Road. You see where our site is. There's traffic light there. We feel like we're proper distance from the traffic light. CVS, Food Line Shopping Center. Again, the site is in Gary Skinner and Mary Lee Carter District in the Lee Hill District, tax map 25A41. The size is approximately 4,045 square foot building, 1 acre. There's a sort of a block shed in the back as well. At the current use current zoning and use is R2 residential convenience store, which is grandfathered. Proposed zoning is C3, which is the highest commercial. Next slide, please. If you would look at the zoning map, you'll see C2 zoning at the Food Lion Shopping Center, C3 zoning, which was the tire shop that was alluded to earlier, C2, which is right next to us, C1, Lighthouse Academy, is again next to us, adjacent to us, and C3 across the street. That's where 7-Eleven is. So why C3? R2 is a hindrance. I think everybody can agree to that in a commercial area. The site has been commercially used for over 50 years. As a result of the current zoning, previous owners, several in fact, have had many issues utilizing the property, especially when 7-Eleven came in. The fact that there was a convenience store, it tended to go down and down and down and down. Rezoning from R2 to C3 will not create a burden to the county, at least we don't think so, for the neighbors, and in fact, we think that would further increase the economic value of that corridor. No specific user in mind that we have right now, and prospects have really been all over the board. And if you go to the next slide, you actually can see our prospect list. I've shown the property, again, I've been tasked with the sales, leasing, marketing for JR Properties around the commercial portfolio. And I've shown property with some significant interest. Barbecue restaurant, nail and hair salon, a microbrewery, which actually landed just recently in the city of Fredericksburg. So we feel bad that we lost out on them, but again, it wasn't properly zoned for a microbrewery. That was just recently rezoned from industrial use to allowable use to C3. That was passed in October, November of last year. Used car dealerships, coffee shop, indoor fireworks store, thrift shop, paint shop, a convenience store, but again, backed out due to proximity to 7-Eleven, Food Line, CVS, a Latin market, and then a sports retail, which is confidential at this time. Next slide, please. So what have we done already that we think is positive? We continue to repair and improve and renovate the parking lot as well as the building. We did put a brand new roof on. We removed the entire interior so we can build a turnkey space for the tenants. And yes, right now, we do have to admit that something did get lost in translation with our team and with our hired contractors when it came to applying for a roof permit and a pre-demo permit. In fact, we weren't even aware that we needed a roof permit. This is something that we candidly discussed at our TRC meeting when we talked about this, and it was determined that we didn't have such permits. Once it was determined that we didn't have the permits, the county placed a stop work order, and we adhered to that, paid our fees, and stopped work until we received those permits. Although this has no bearing on the rezoning whatsoever, I feel like I wanted to bring it up so there wasn't any confusion. To continue moving forward, we removed items and debris from the property, phone booth, tires, etc. New masonry and storefronts. We'll paint exterior in the spring as well as the interior once we get 1 or 2 tenants. Receive quotes for a new parking lot, not just patchwork. Looking into getting off septic and going on to county sewer. Begin marketing the building as an ideal retail or office user, and paid about $13,000 for the rezoning and create a GDP. And I say reluctantly, and if you go to the next slide, we submitted a Plata survey, and we were asked to do a GDP, which costs about $2,500. So if you look to the left and look to the right, they're eerily similar. You have a vicinity map, some other numbers to your right-hand side, but again, very, very similar. Next slide. Again, let's all admit that this building is an eyesore for the county, and we want to improve the building. We want to make it marketable, and it just wasn't very attractive. Inside, outside, rooftop, parking lot, the whole area. Next slide, please. Exterior improvements, which you've already seen a picture of it. We feel that already we've drastically increased the potential of this building. Just by the way it looks right now. We've received more phone calls than what it looked like before. People know that we're doing something out there, and they're excited about it. Next slide. Interior mess. You know, these pictures right here, they don't look too terrible, but in fact they were. If anybody had gone in there before it closed, during the auction, whenever you might have gone in there, it was in rough shape, especially towards the back where they actually did cook food. It was pretty bad. Next slide, please. Interior improvements. Again, if you can envision sort of a warehouse, flex space, cold dark shell, that's essentially what it is right now. When we first looked into purchasing the building, we thought about, hey, there's a nice 4,000 square foot building. When we did a little bit more investigation into it, we saw the columns aligned perfectly. So we thought, why not move the doors a little bit to the opposite sides of each other, and with the potential of creating 2 users. So It would be one user on one side, the other user essentially creating two suites. Next slide, please. Of course, we don't have a finished project yet. We're still working on it continuously, but this is what our finished exterior rendering would look like in the front. As you can see, brand new storefronts, brand new glass, brand new doors. Again, those doors will probably most likely go to the right just a little bit, and that's what our plans call for. And stucco ephes, and again, there will be some color to it, some sort of dark, either dark tan, gray, maybe a little bit of blue in there. So again, a much better appearance. And we're going to paint, again, we're going to paint the exterior. We're going to add two doors, so we have two exit doors to the side. And of course, we'll match up the paint to the stucco. Next slide, please. I'm sure you're wondering why we didn't agree to the staff proffers at this time. Over the past 50 years, the store has functioned with no issues that the county is requesting that we proffer, and rezoning would not change the following. Entrances. Although its entrances may not meet current standards, they have not caused any problems yet. In fact, we see it as a plus that we have two entrances. Screening. Neighboring properties have developed around it despite the lack of screening. Lighting. The property has had exterior lighting for many years. Interparcel connection. There has not been a need for an interparcel connector before. Stormwater management. A rezoning will not change the property's stormwater runoff. Sewage disposal. County says there's no such record. The store has operated for 50 years. Obviously, there has to be an operating sewage disposal system. Street buffers, sidewalks. There hasn't been a need for street buffers, sidewalks, and adjacent C2 and C3 parcels do not have sidewalks. If you go to the next slide, that you've already seen before. So again, you'll notice that the property that's closest to food line, zone C3, no sidewalk. The property that's closest to us, C2, again, no sidewalk. So we feel that, again, with the sidewalks, although we're not opposed to doing the sidewalks, and I'll elaborate that in my next slide, we're not opposed to doing sidewalks in the near future. The mere fact that those parcels don't have sidewalks, we're not redeveloping the site. I heard Kimberly say, well, once they're redeveloped, we're going to require sidewalks. We're not redeveloping the site, i.e. no need for sidewalks at this time. So in closing, we fully agree and acknowledge that if and when our site requires a site plan approval, and this is for any improvement which involves more than 2,500 square feet of land disturbance, we will seek to obtain site plan approval. By doing this action, it will require that we meet many of the recommendations such as screening, buffering, sidewalks, set forth in the comment letter by the county. However, until a change in the site occurs, i.e. redevelopment, we believe a rezoning does not merit these changes at this time because proffers are 100% recommended, optional for this rezoning case. Thank you very much, and happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions? Okay, thank you. We'll hear from the public. If anybody here from the public that wishes to speak?
Thank you very much.
Anybody signed up, Paulette? Okay, very well.
I have 1%.
Go ahead.
On the
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you meant for me, ma'am.
no, honey.
Okay.
I'm not.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
It's a code requirement for all commercial developments to construct sidewalks along their frontage. In fact, it's a code requirement for all development, residential, commercial. All development has the requirement to install sidewalks and continue those connections for the sidewalk network.
Subdivision that's in that area.
Yes, ma'am.
over to development there, okay? Across the street,
Yes, ma'am.
that's sidewalks, am I correct?
Ma'am.
Needed to do it that time.
Yes, ma'am. Mhm.
Ms. Carter, do you have your mic on?
I thought everybody could hear me. Did everybody hear what I said? I'm sure they did. Okay. So, landscaping has not been addressed, am I correct, at this time? All right. Now, with the septic, that's not, would not be a county problem, am I correct? That would be health department?
I mentioned that just as information for the applicant to get a certificate of occupancy from the building department. The health department will have to approve the system. So the building won't issue the CO without an approval from the health department. So it's just more of a heads up.
Okay. All right, that's all I have at this time, Mr. Chairman.
In order to get a building permit, I would assume that the applicant would need to be in compliance with the current stormwater management regs, or is that just simply based off disturbed area? Do you know? Can you answer that for me?
Sorry. That is based off of disturbance. So if they're
Disturbance.
not disturbing on the site, they're simply working within that building shell, it would not trigger that.
Okay, and if I understood correctly, the parking lot, Mark, if I may ask a question, the parking lot is, you're planning to redo that, or at some point down the future, you're planning to do that?
No, I mean, when you have tenants moving in, they're not gonna wanna have a parking lot like that. I don't know if you've driven by the road pretty recently, but there's potholes, in both entrances. So, you know, unless you wanna go like this and, go to the left, go to the right, as opposed to actually going in, no, I mean, we fully plan on doing that. We just need to build it out, which we are right now. And then again, once we get tenants in there, but we can't get tenants in there until we actually rezone it. So to answer, the long and short of it is, to answer your question, yes, we do plan on actually repaving the parking lot.
So at that time, you would need to get a site plan approved?
The site plan is based on new disturbance. So they're just doing an overlay on the existing parking lot. And it would have to be at least 2,500 square
Square
feet
feet.
of new disturbance.
Anything else?
Now, yes. Now, Kim, I am correct that at this time, our same use could go in there. They could lease that to someone who was going to have the same use that it has at this time. But otherwise, they would have to meet the requirements, just as everyone else has met the requirements, or would have to meet the requirements if approved. Am I correct? For commercial.
Meet what requirements? I'm sorry.
Like the sidewalks and the, landscaping and
If
of course,
they-
the two entrances, which the two entrances never bothered me, but however, everything else has, been a question to me.
So a convenience store could continue to operate on the site.
Okay,
If the property is rezoned and there is no redevelopment to the site, there's no requirement for a site plan, so there's no trigger to install those improvements. So that's why we're bringing it up as part of this rezoning process.
all right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Kimberly, on the two adjacent parcels that were C2 and C3 that Mark mentioned, they were zoned before the requirements for the sidewalks, I'm
Sir.
assuming, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? At this point, I guess I officially have to close the public hearing, is that correct? So I will do that and take a motion on this.
I have worked many hours and hours and hours on this, along with planning staff, and also with the applicant. And the requirements that we have in the county have to be met. To me, you cannot say, well, one rezoning can have this set of rules and another rezoning, we won't have that set of rules. That's just not good planning. It's there, it's black and white on what we have to do, and therefore, at this time, those requirements are not being met, and so therefore, I vote for a denial of R150008.
Can I get a second?
I'll second that.
I guess, any other comment?
Mr. Newhouse, I just wanted to make a point of clarification. Ms. Carter mentioned requirements. Obviously, proffers are voluntary, so it's not something that the Planning Commission can require. I just wanted to check to make sure that I understood you correctly. I think what you're saying is the conditions of the property that concern you are not being met. Not that the Planning Commission can or could require anything. It's just that your concerns with the property related to pedestrian safety, public safety, welfare of the county are not being met, and therefore, that's the reason.
right.
I just wanted to clarify that.
And by what staff has presented to us, those have not been met, and so therefore, that's the reason for mine.
Thank you. I just wanted to, double check because again, proffers are voluntary. It's certainly not something
That's
the
right.
Planning Commission can require. And I just heard you use the word
we
require, so I wanted you to clarify.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
And a vote yes is to deny the application.
Yes.
If that's the motion. So if you can go ahead and vote. It is 6-1 for denial. We will move on to the next item.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
New business? Any new business?
No new business.
Any public comment at this point on any issue other than the public hearing we just concluded? Hearing none, I'll go for a motion to adjourn. Hey, do you have a comment?
Please, Chair, I'd like to have
Absolutely.
something to say before we close. Staff has given me a report on the long-eared bat. I'd like to have everyone here have this same report, and I would like to task staff with a recommendation on this project for the 17th meeting. Thank you.
Anything else?
Motion to adjourn. Second.
Second?
Second, third.
Vote. Thank you very much.
Okay.